I've talked earlier about the importance of having domain expertise, and I'd like to use an example of the largest industry we have in the United States, which is the U.S. healthcare system, $2.8 trillion in size, 17% of our GDP, and how this monumental industry is so ill prepared to be sustainable in the future, and how ripe it is for disruption by the private sector to be able to go in and solve what the special interests, the politicians, the lawyers, the legacy systems, all of these things are of need to be dramatically disrupted with innovation, and how resistant to change and how insulated the U.S. healthcare system has been from any substantial innovation in the past. There's a great deal of money spent on new technologies and innovations in medicine, but ironically, in our healthcare system, because of the cultural characteristics of the United States, we actually are finding that better medicine leads to higher costs because it is part of our culture in the U.S. to keep people alive as long as possible, regardless of whether that's a comfortable state for the patient. It comes down to a series of religious points of view. And it's very difficult in our country not to let people stay alive as long as possible. And the result is that in our system, typically 80% of the spend for a person's medical expense takes place in the last several months of their life. And that's one of the reasons which biases the heavy expenditure in the U.S. healthcare system to be double that on a percent to GDP of any other health system in the world. So while we're around 17% of GDP for our healthcare system, moving to perhaps as high as 25% if there is no change in any of the major health reimbursement policies we have in the U.S., the reality is that the rest of the world is more typically 7 or 8% GDP, and they actually cover a larger percentage of the population in at least many of the Western countries. So think about healthcare this way. The businesses that have been disrupted in the last, say, 20 years have largely been disrupted by looking at cheaper, faster, better, more convenient services or products that reach the needs or wants of customers. Everything has been about revolutions that have dramatically changed the experience of customers. And you can see this in the music industry, you can see it in the publishing industry, you can see it in electronic commerce. Just about every industry that's been touched by technology innovation has been disrupted because it's changed the opportunities and the expectations of what customers can expect, except for healthcare and except for education. Healthcare has not been a customer-centric industry. It's been a special interest-centric industry. And consequently, the legacy services and systems we have, the outmoded ways in which fees are reimbursed, are there because of long legacy policy issues that were established for no particular logical reason that had anything to do with the customer, in this case the patient, but were established because of some precedent that had been indoctrinated maybe decades ago.